The future of tech is completely about partnerships.
Ruba, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us, how much can generative and agentic AI totally change the advertising process?
I think in the past year, we have seen that whatever we predict is going to be wrong. It'll be out of date nearly immediately. And if you think about every single function is being disrupted, I think this time last year, we were talking about the impact of AI, the potential of AI, and companies were talking about how it'll help with hyper-personalization. Yet they were still talking about customer archetypes. In fact, I actually attended a talk where someone said that they'd looked at all of this data and distilled it down to 64 customer archetypes. But I think now with AI, the idea of an archetype goes away because it's now the individual. You can actually use the data to provide insights to be able to meet the consumer where they are. So let's talk about an example. You can actually, in monetization, it can completely change monetization, where if you know the attributes of a certain buyer, their buying propensity, what are the things that they are interested in, you may think that, hey, let's not put this content for a magazine or a newspaper behind a paywall because this consumer is a high value ad targeting consumer. So this ad value is greater than the subscription value. That is an individual user, and it's personalization for that user and a monetization model for that user. What we're talking about is going from 64 archetypes down to billions of archetypes because it is down to the individual.
It's all changing so fast. How do organizations sort of manage those two horizons of simultaneously scaling up Gen AI for now, but also preparing for the future of agentic AI?
So at AWS, with working with lots of customers and partners, we've seen a few themes of what makes companies successful. I think one of the ones that sounds obvious in retrospect, but is really critical, and I think more critical than ever in this transition, is top-down leadership on this topic. The reason is that when you're looking at how to get the most value out of AI, it's really about disrupting an entire workflow, not individual processes or sub-processes within a workflow. But a typical organization has grown by creating these functions that are optimizing each of those processes. So looking at it end to end, that requires top-down mandate to be able to drive it. The second key success factor we've seen is tackle the hard problems, because the hard problems will force you to get your data foundation right, build a unified data platform. It'll force you to get your governance and security right, because just because an agent will get insights out of a bunch of data doesn't mean you want every agent to have access to every piece of data. You've got to have the right governance and security in place. And then the last one is don't forget the people side of change, making sure we're focusing on the humans that are going to be super powered with this technology.
How important are partnerships within the creative industry? So what does a successful partnership in the world of agentic AI look like?
I think the future of tech is completely about partnerships. A study that is now probably a year or so old, we saw that nearly half of all business outcomes required 4 or more partners. I think that number today is greater. I mean, if you think about, some of the case studies that I see, AWS is part of the mix. A frontier model provider is part of the mix. Think OpenAI or Anthropic or the over 100 models we have available on Amazon Bedrock. Then you potentially have an ISV provider, one of our top ISVs like Salesforce or Databricks or Snowflake. And then you would potentially have a systems integrator or a business consultancy that's supporting that. And that today is the minimum. And if we look at media in particular, there are over 600 partners that are focused on media and entertainment alone. And that is the future. And so partners who are able to deliver solutions together are going to improve the time from idea to production.
Oh, Ruba, thanks so much for joining us here to talk about it all.
Thank you so much for having me.